All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a good lunch. Let's see. Is Samantha here? All right, I don't see Samantha yet. So why don't we kick off with, all right, well, first, let me ask, do folks want to hear a presentation by Jacob on the solar ready energy system? All right, we got a few. Jacob, you with us?
I am here.
All right.
Pull up the PDF to walk through and share my screen.
Great, thanks. And I am recording this, everyone.
Hopefully everyone can see it.
We got it.
Okay. I'll walk through this as best as I know it. Like I said, my coworker kind of was involved in this a little bit further, wasn't able to hop on last minute. But so this is really kind of looking at planning and cost allocation within Maryland, and really keeping an eye toward some of those proactive opportunities for us to do system upgrades ahead of where some of those needs are for the solar developers. And so it's really kind of looking at it, from an investment perspective, 3 different types of investments, and looking at kind of what the cost allocation is for each of those, and the beneficiaries as well. So obviously you have dedicated customer investments that are specific to a single customer as it relates to their interconnection. You have areas where you may have pooled customer investments, right? So if you've identified a subset of an area or a subset of customers that are all looking to interconnect, you can look from an allocation approach to be able to share that among that specific pool. And then you have the third category, which is really where this starts to dive further into, is broader system investments, right? Where those customers that are benefiting from it are more than just the ones that are looking to interconnect it. It's a much broader set. And so looking at those, how can you have a broader cost recovery strategy for those system investments that still looks to have some amount of customer contribution, right? And so it's not purely through revenue recovery. So these are examples kind of breaking that down, each of those 3 types, into what it would kind of look like investment-wise for large solar and small solar. And the solar ready energy system really focuses on large solar investments that are triggering system-wide investments, where there's benefits to a larger subset of customers, which looks like things like reconductoring, like new substation transformers or relay upgrades at the substation, right? So as we've kind of talked about today, some of those larger, more expensive upgrades that happen, obviously it's important to recognize that the beneficiaries of those type of system investments are broader than necessarily just the interconnecting customers. So what does this start to look like, the solar ready energy system? So this is really, I think, a concept that has been used somewhat or similarly on the transmission system, and it's something that we thought can be translated and learned from and applied to the distribution system. So it's really trying to plan for those large solar interconnections, which sometimes can be difficult with forecasting to see that in just a DER statistical forecast, but seeing where those large chunks are going. The idea here is then you do a system upgrade proactively to create these solar ready areas. You set a then fee for interconnection and for those customers, and then those fees from those interconnecting customers help offset any revenue requirements that are stemming from these system upgrades. And really, throughout this, it's really trying to hit 4 key points that you'll see throughout, is trying to create fair cost sharing, trying to provide cost certainty and price signals, as well as help mitigate any potential restricted feeders. So what does this start to look like? This, in terms of setting the fee, the way this happens is, the utility will identify what those upgrades are necessary to create that solar ready area. And then that translates into, a $1 per megawatt fee based on what those incremental investments are going to be and the locations that are then ready for interconnection. So if customers are then looking to interconnect in the solar ready areas, they would pay that upgrade fee. If customers are looking to connect outside of those solar ready areas, they would be looking to pay, that upgrade fee and some surcharge, or the upgrade cost that they would have incurred for their specific interconnection location, whichever is lesser. Again, this is really about setting those fees that customers, would pay as part of the upgrades for those large solar interconnections. And the way the utilities, would be able to learn more about where these customers are seeking to interconnect is through a biannual RFI to stakeholders and customers and people familiar with the projects of where are they interested in connecting, right? That can help the utilities have information and understand better what areas should they be developing proactively as these solar ready areas. And so once you get back information around land purchase, siting, permitting questions, sizing from developers, utilities can then prioritize areas as solar ready areas and look to do those investments in those locations. So I know I talked through that very quickly and probably at a very high level, but that was really, I don't know if it got, as further developed, but this was really a concept that we thought of as an opportunity to really hit on some of these key things that developers and stakeholders are looking at in terms of the cost sharing, the price signaling, the cost certainty, and being able to be proactive in some of these system upgrades to support the DER growth within the system, and really targeting some of those large solar customers where it can be a challenge to forecast where they will be. And those are the, upgrades that may potentially be the biggest impact, the largest impact upgrades on the system, and how can we get ahead of those? So that's just kind of a brief recap of the solar ready, energy system concept.
All right, thanks, Jacob. Any questions for Jacob on that presentation?
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Jacob. This is Eli. Yeah, just to maybe quickly add some color, because I think this is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, but this is what turned into the hosting capacity upgrade plans, I believe, in the interconnection work group, and this is what was approved by the PSC, right? Or are we talking about a different program? I'm pretty sure this is just the hosting capacity upgrade plan.
My understanding was it was proposed within the interconnection, but wasn't solidified as the hosting capacity upgrade plan. But one of the concepts kind of batted around that could kind of fit that model. I may be wrong on that though.
Okay. I guess I'm curious if others who have maybe been involved in the interconnection work group share that opinion, or think that the solar ready areas is actually the same as the hosting capacity upgrade plan.
Hey, Eli, it's Mark Zuga, Potomac Edison. Generally agree with you. That was proposed as an option, and I agree that hosting capacity upgrade plans, which kind of existed before, but was kind of added to in this last rulemaking, is kind of an implementation of the solution. So I think they're not exactly the same, but I think it's the same concept. Hosting capacity upgrade plan, if the utilities prefer to do that, would incorporate a proposal to the commission. It also would include a cost sharing proposal, and also what the cost per megawatt to connect within that's what I was going to call it a solar ready area, but that's Jacob's specific term. But within that area, what it would cost, and that would kind of be separate from their other MCAM fees. So
right.
Generally agreeing with you, Eli. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my interpretation as well. So I think the only question I have, and I don't know if we could go back, I think it was back one slide, if you don't mind. Yes, thank you. So I wanted to maybe just ask, and Jacob, I'll get if you, it sounds like you've only been somewhat close to this process, and so you may not have all this information, but one of the directives that this work group now has that came from the interconnection work group and or came from the RM81 hearing from the interconnection work group. And it was one of those 4 bullets that John presented on 2 weeks ago, which is DER forecasting to determine areas in need of hosting capacity upgrade plans. And that's one of our directives to work on. And I have been under the impression that what you're presenting here is effectively now the hosting capacity upgrade plan, or that this process that you're highlighting is effectively the process whereby the utilities determine what are the areas in need of hosting capacity upgrade plans. And this is what I was hoping for clarity on. It sounds like the process to make that determination is exclusively based on the RFI and is pretty much solely dependent on the information that you all receive back from the stakeholders and developers, et cetera, who respond to the RFI. And I assume basically they're kind of, the goal is to say, all right, where are developers seeking to interconnect on the system, running some probably type of, analysis to say, all right, if they, deploy all of these DER in this area, how will that impact the grid? If it will result in overloads, let's do an upgrade in that area. Is that a correct, from your understanding at least, is that a correct characterization for how the utilities will determine the areas that are ripe for hosting capacity upgrade plans or solar ready area plans, whichever we're calling them?
I think at least my understanding of it is that would be, and I want to go back a couple more slides, right? This is really focused on this piece, right? The large solar, systems that are going to potentially have large impacts to system-wide investment. So this is really where that piece is focusing in. And I think then recognizing that proactive hosting capacity could impact other areas as well. But this process specifically is focused on those large solar systems that may be sometimes more difficult to forecast, and really trying to find a way to capture that information and proactively build out to support them.
Okay. And I think you're confirming what I'm saying. It sounds like, and I think what I'm trying to ultimately get at is, what are the utilities relying on to make the call of, this city is an area where we should do a hosting capacity upgrade? It sounds like it's largely based on the RFI response and not necessarily based on a DER forecast, which is totally fine. I'm just trying to understand what the process is. Is that right? From your knowledge, it sounds like you guys look at the information you receive in the RFI. Developers are looking to deploy here, here, and here. So we recommend doing the upgrade plans here, here, and here. It's not really like we, the utility, have forecasted that there will be DER expansions in like these areas, and we're going to propose to do the upgrades here. It's the former, right? It's about what you hear in response to the RFI, not about what you as utilities forecast to make that call. Is that correct?
For this specific process.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay. No, that's helpful to know.
May I add to that conversation a little? Well, welcome, Eli. I missed you.
Missed you, Eric.
Curious, as we think through those RFIs and what I would consider possible stakeholder involvements into our planning process, these information from the RFI could potentially end up in the forecast and effectively drive some of the integration of that data into the forecast. So, as I've said prior, is that we don't necessarily have the full picture of what the end state may look like, but just wanted to share that as we are thinking through what the stakeholder processes may look like into the overall planning process, this RFI could be an input into that is then taken into our forecast and effectively feed into what you were recommending for forecast-driven locations where we would target solar deployment. Does that sort of make sense to you?
Yeah, it does, Eric. And if I can try to maybe re-explain and make sure I'm understanding it correctly. It sounds like, as is written, this plan would largely utilize the RFI process to determine areas right for upgrades. However, the utilities will also, the plan is also to utilize the information you receive in those RFI responses to feed into your DER forecasting, which would be a good process. And it sounds like that's what you all are thinking.
So I would just caution the should and put could in the wording, because just to have optionality for the utilities who want to implement those solutions in different ways. But yeah, that's one method of how to integrate the data.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks, Eric.
All right, we'll go Al, then Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome back, everybody. The discussion that just went on about having this process feed into the overall forecasting process, something that makes a lot of sense. I just want to go back to a question that I raised earlier, because the objective of this is essentially how to pay for investments, and that through this setting of fees. And so I'm wondering once again, and I'll have to ask Mark because it went by me too fast. But I want to ask about the bilateral, the infrastructure bill and the IRA bill monies that certainly these sorts of investments that we're talking about would be eligible for investment under those pieces of federal legislation. And we haven't really talked a lot about how to take advantage of those but distribution system modernization, upgrades, adaptation to distributed energy, and so on is really one of the things that is central to those sources of funding. And how we take those into account, I think, is really important. So again, this process, I think that the process of getting input from stakeholders through an RFA kind of process is great. Making that part of the forecasting process is great. But I want us to be thinking about using those monies that are available to us while they're available, so that this doesn't have to be seen as simply a way of allocating costs to users, when in fact there's funding for it available from other places. And Mark, I missed your reference to where those monthly reports are. I do know that CSNA specified an end of year report by the utilities on what they had at least applied for, and I think we're doing with BIL and IRA money. But where are those monthly reports listed? I thought you said RM56, but it can't be RM56. That's community solar.
I had it a second ago. PC56, Public Conference 56. I believe if you look in that docket, you'll find monthly reports, and that is specific to the IIJA, which I believe is the BIL, correct?
BIL, yeah. Okay, and I think that, again, CSNA does specify an annual report, so I'm assuming that will happen sometime not too long from now. That would be good to look at too. But I just want to bring this issue of the federal funding back into our discussion, because a lot of things we're talking about should fall in the purview of that funding.
Mark, did you had your hand up, sir?
Oh, I did. Yes, I mean, very much agree on the point about the federal funds. I mean, obviously we venture to use any of those that we can. I'm just going back to the hosting capacity upgrade plans. Just agreeing in part that the language that was approved does say that utilities may propose plans if our forecasted DER installations are greater than the forecasted available hosting capacity, and then those plans may be considered by the commission based on a technical calculation. Basically, if the hosting capacity upgrade fee or fees that would be in place for those areas exceed the average of hosting capacity upgrades performed in the last year. And I may not have got that exactly right, but the point is that there's, there is like, it's greater than your forecast, but there is also a calculation involved that at least Potomac Edison plans to use as a guideline as to when, we should be looking at those. That's really not forecast based. That's going to be based off of basically what is the available hosting capacity and how much does it cost to upgrade that area to do it. So just wanted to point out that's what was approved in RM81.
All right, thank you, Mark. All right, any other questions or comments on either the presentation or what Mark or Al have brought up? All right, and it looks like the updates that are in PC56, they're not overly extensive. You can go through them pretty quickly, maybe a page or two at most. So, but it looks like all the utilities have been filing on a monthly basis. All right, let's see. Okay, locational value definition and components of that are going to go into that. I think OPC commented on that. Yep.
Yeah, our comments were primarily just providing some example of like other jurisdictions that are tackling this problem, and kind of where they've been and giving some example there.
Right. Utilities put in some things. Jacob, do you guys have any comments or responses to OPC recommended looking at Illinois and using the National Standard Practice Manual for benefit cost analysis of DERs. That's not a whole lot there. Yes, Al. Well, I'm sorry, Al. Okay. Give you some time to think about it.
Go ahead, Jacob. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say, at least for the BCA part, I believe that's what's being used within the UPCA working group. I'm not directly involved in that, so if others are involved in that working group, I think Al, you've brought up previously, obviously that working group is doing some stuff, and so just making sure we're not treading on other people's territory there.
And I think that's being led by Brett Sproul, and if he's available, he'll be here next week, next meeting. But go ahead, Al.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say as well, that it's a case 9674, I believe. They are specifically working on applying the National Standard Practice Manual at the request of the PSC itself to develop the unified cost benefit analysis for the different kinds of DER. So it's a comprehensive process. It should be a good process. So I think I agree with Jacob that we should be going with that. The one thing I would point out is that as we go into this cost benefit analysis in December, the EPA recalculated after a lot of expert consultation the social value of carbon deferment, basically, which is $190 now per metric ton, not 51 anymore. So it makes a lot of difference in terms of how you look at value of distributed energy or carbon reduction, which of course is one of the major things that we're all working towards under CSNA. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Tim.
Just a quick question on that and clarification. So there's a separate working group that's specifically working on cost benefit analysis, and that's specifically with the context of non-wires alternatives, I assume.
I don't think so. I mean, I think that you would cost a non-wires alternative in relation to the value of the distributed whatever generation or whatever that or energy efficiency as well that you're working on. How you get the reduction or the benefit depends on what turns out to be the most beneficial analysis. The point is that the input to that cost benefit analysis would include the value as determined under this standard practice of the DER as determined for Maryland.
Okay. Well, yeah. So it just, yeah. So in that context, then the discussion of value DER feels very overlapping with that group in that case. Then, yeah, I would have to think about that then.
Yeah, wait, and sorry, just to piggyback off of Tim's question. So if folks can maybe clarify, because I'm also less familiar with this work group. This work group is tasked with developing a benefit cost assessment of what exactly? Or what is the work group's objective for those who are more familiar?
Go ahead, DeAndre.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I am on the work group, and the work group was tasked with incorporating the NPSM method of determining the value or benefits of DER for the purposes of establishing a standard in the state of Maryland at which the commission will be able to evaluate projects that are brought before the commission. It can serve as a guide. It can serve as a guide for the utilities when establishing distribution system planning, because you can foresee what the commission values in regards to distribution system planning and distributed energy resources. But it's simply a guide or a standard for the commission to evaluate various projects, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, DeAndre, that helps a lot. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So if I could just add, it sounds to me like the BCA work group it's a relatively similar effort to what we're discussing here, right? We're talking about locational value of DER. And so what would be interesting to understand, and where these work groups should certainly be coordinated, is in what are the benefits that the BCA work group is considering for DER, and are they considering a locational benefit? If they are, then I think that, that effectively captures what Jade is trying to encompass here, right? The idea that DERs are able to provide locational value and therefore should be compensated accordingly. And it sounds to me like a BCA framework, if it indeed incorporates locational value of DER, then it successfully achieves that. It's ultimately just a question of what does that work group consider as the benefits? What are all the benefits they're capturing, and what are the costs they're capturing in that analysis? So it sounds to me like the two work groups probably should stay synced up on this matter. Yeah, I'll stop there.
All right, and like I said, hopefully Brett, I've been in touch with him, and hopefully he can present to us in 2 weeks what exactly he's doing, his work group's doing, and I will make sure that he addresses what benefits and costs that they're considering in their evaluation. Yes, DeAndre.
That would be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add some more substance to what is being done in the UBCA. A specific value is not of discussion in the work group, but more so that there is an impact or a value associated with the various types of DER, not the specific value. If that makes any sense, if that kind of clears things up. So when we talk about energy storage, We're talking about the impact that it has on, from a system standpoint, from a host customer standpoint, from a societal standpoint, not so much down to a specific dollar value or a locational value, but more so its overall impact on the various aspects of, from society to system to host. That kind of it's a little more high level. I think it's still left, the specific value and benefits are still will still have to be analyzed and determined by the specific utility, but the idea that there is an impact is what's more so being determined, if that brings any more clarity.
All right. Thank you, DeAndre. We'll go Tim, then Eric.
No, yeah, thank you, DeAndre. I think that does make sense. And I think the only thing I'm going to add on top of Eli's point is just that from that, you know, if the other working group is establishing, you know, kind of like methodologies and you know, establishing what things go into the value of DER. Just one thing that this working group can like incorporate and think on is how those methodologies and how those like values and assessments can be can inform the planning process, particularly around I think this is one of our ideas, one of our points on non-Mars alternatives, and I know we haven't really hit on this yet in the working group, but how that informs the evaluation of DER in the planning process to determine you know, what is the optimal solution. So that's something to keep in mind, is just how the value of DER is incorporated into planning, even if we're not developing that process and assessment here.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Eric.
Thank you, Judge. Totally agree with Tim's comments on discussing methodology at this level, but do have a level of concern in regards to Eli's comments on compensation, right, from a locational value perspective. I am not sure if that is something that this is distribution system planning, right, should be addressing compensation versus just the overall process. I think there are other external mechanisms. Man, I'm borrowing that word from the storage work group. That's scary. Other mechanisms out there that are available to us to identify compensation. But when we're talking about cost benefit analysis, typically it's looking at the cost, overall cost, potential cost. It's looking at the benefits that it brings to the table. But compensation is, I have a little concern on that recommendation from Eli. Thank you.
Eli, you want to chime in, or?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, I mean, what I'll first note is that locational value assessment is contained within the JADE process map. This group has been tasked with reviewing the JADE process map and determining how it applies to Maryland and can be used to effectuate modernized distribution system planning here. So I do think the locational value assessment piece should be factored into distribution system planning. Again, it's an explicit part of the roadmap. I think it should be used to determine the cost effectiveness of DER solutions as they compare to one another or as they compare to traditional grid solutions. And so locational value of DER can be considered a benefit or a cost if it's causing costs in a benefit cost analysis. And it sounds like, based on DeAndre's comment, that the benefit cost analysis is intended to be used to determine whether DER solutions are cost-effective solutions going forward. So I think the compensation piece is inherently intertwined in that if there is any locational value assigned to DER and there's a cost-benefit analysis kind of governing what is effectively the value of that DER, then that would become a part of the distribution system planning process, not through a differentiated compensation mechanism. So I'm not suggesting that, to be clear, but just in that a BCA would allow utilities to better determine when DERs are cost effective according to the benefits that DERs can provide. And so I'm not recommending a disparate, new compensation mechanism. It's more so the idea that DERs do provide locational value. That locational value should be considered when utilities are making distribution system planning decisions.
That help, Eric, or clarify?
So I think Eli's comments and on the cost and benefit we're in alignment with, but the explanation, the way I interpreted, and this is how Eric interpreted it, I didn't see a compensation piece to that, right? Because I'm not trying to design how developers would price a solution, right? I'm not in that business of determining how developers price their solutions. If a developer wants to price a solution against any of our solutions we have from a utility perspective, right, then that goes into the analysis. But we, on the utility side, wouldn't be determining what the compensation should look like for resources.
That's right, Eric. And apologies if what I said felt antithetical to that. Definitely not what I was trying to say. You're right. We wouldn't be talking about the specifics of compensation in this work group. I think more so just that, in order to determine if a DER is cost effective, it needs to be evaluated under a benefits and a cost analysis. And that benefits cost analysis should factor in the locational value of that DER, either as a benefit if it provides a benefit or as a cost if it results in a cost to the grid. So I think we're in alignment.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Jacob, I saw Al, I'm coming to you. Jacob, did you want to weigh in on that, or did you have a...
No, I think Eli just clarified. I was just going to try and do some three-part communication just to make sure we were understanding it, but I think Eli and Eric got to the point.
Excellent. All right. Mr. Bartlett.
Yeah, thanks. Just to start out a little bit, I think that so far it's been good discussion. Two aspects of it. One, locational value is not limited just to the monetary cost benefit analysis. I think that what we're saying, I believe, is that we want to take into account the work that this other working group is doing, so that when we talk about cost benefit, we're using an agreed upon framework. The point is that actually we don't have that framework right now. And so that's that point. But locational value can include other aspects besides cost or cost benefit. For example, a microgrid for a key facility has a locational value that's not necessarily identifiable under a cost benefit analysis. And so that when we talk about locational value, I think we should be aware that we're talking about something bigger than just UCBA. On the other hand, the cost benefit analysis is the importance of it is not restricted to this planning process. And I think that's what Eli and Eric just agreed on. But cost benefit analysis is a core part of utilities capital investment plans. And as we have been told by our utility colleagues in phase one, presently cost benefit analysis does not include any cost, or that doesn't include benefit for DERs. And so one of the purposes of having this 9674 process is to give the commission a tool by which they can include analysis of cost and benefit of DERs in the proposals for capital development that the utilities are bringing, which then does feed back into rate determination, I suppose. And so there are other purposes to this that are relevant to compensation, I guess is the thing we were talking about, but that's not in this working group. That's all.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, Samantha.
Hi. I don't know if it's a question or a statement. I think it might be a clarifying statement, because I want to make sure that I am thinking about this the same way as Eli and Al and others who've spoken up are. And, I'm thinking about, okay, how does this, it seems like what we're talking about is how does this benefit cost analysis relate to what we're doing here in this group? And I see it relating specifically to the potential procurement of non-wire solutions. And in other words, utilities will have to, if and when they procure non-wire solutions, they'll have to evaluate different options, right? And part of that evaluation should include some kind of assessment of the locational value. So I guess that's my clarifying point, is that's how I've been thinking about this. So maybe my clarifying question is that pretty much what others are saying? I think, we started talking about DER compensation mechanisms, and it sounded like that's not what OPC was intending to convey. But I want to make sure I understand like the full scope of the use case for the benefit cost analysis issue. I hate to belabor this, but just want to make sure I know what we're talking about. That's all.
No, it's no apology necessary. Go
was-
ahead, Eli.
Yeah, Sam, that was consistent with what I think I'm that was consistent with what I intended to say. What I think I heard based on DeAndre's explanation is that the BCA will be used for decision making related to DER procurement. So yeah, I would assume that non-wire solutions is encompassed in that. But again, yeah, I haven't been involved in BCA, so in the BCA work group, I should say. So if anyone else is, and I mischaracterized, please correct me.
All right, Mark.
Hey, it's Mark again. I get to be on all the work groups, so I'm on that one as well. So I think DeAndre, yeah, they're all fun. I think DeAndre did a great job of explaining it, and as well as Dr. Bartlett putting it into the chat there. It's to establish a framework, definitely not any specifics, that can be used to do a BCA for all types of DER, and it is broken down by those. For example, like distributed generation, some of the categories are distribution capacity, system losses, distribution O&M, distribution voltage. I would have to think those are locational, because I don't know how you could calculate them if they weren't somewhat locational. But that really hasn't been discussed in detail. So I think generally, yes, the framework would include, it makes sense that it would include some locational value of DER, at least for the distribution values.
All right, thank you, Mark. Does that help, Sam? Or
yeah, it does. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Please don't go anywhere. But do we need to talk any more about locational value, or are we going to punt that until next week, next meeting? All right, we'll punt it. All right, Sam. So I'm sure your ears were burning. We were talking
Uh-oh.
about, no, it's nothing bad. No, we just wanted a developer perspective. We were talking, and Tim and Jacob, please correct me if I get this synopsis wrong, about the information that needs to be provided to developers. And we were talking about protection devices and constraints. And I think it was Eric was looking for examples where developers had to go through the interconnection process. God, Tim, I'm struggling here.
So yeah, I think it was around like where the the hosting capacity maps kind of fall short on informing developer siting decisions, and where even in spite of having a hosting capacity map that tells you whether or not there is capacity on the line, they really needed additional information to make a good siting decision. I think that's kind of where we were getting at.
Okay. Yeah. So you want to know what else folks would like to see on a map aside from like what's the hosting capacity analysis value?
Yeah,
Can I
that, and I know Eric was looking for some specific examples to the extent you're aware of any, where I guess it was there may be a project where there's just slightly less capacity than what's available, and then they've had to go through the interconnection process. Al, you're kind of.
Yeah, I just wanted to, no, actually the point that came up and had come up in the interconnection working group and in this group earlier was that there is an existing reserve capacity established that is quite substantial. That is on 12 and 13 kV lines. The utilities are currently carrying a 3 megawatt capacity limit, a hosting capacity limit, which is well under. I mean, right now we have recently legislatively authorized 5 megawatt community solar projects, for one thing, but that kind of limit existed in other states. It has been technically revisited, and again, the New York example was one where they have moved to what I think Jacob was also talking about, which is a circuit-specific determination of capacity that takes into account the load, the existing distributed generation that might be on that circuit, other characteristics, which maybe Sam can talk to. But basically, it's getting past that 3 megawatt. So it's not just additional information, what Tim was saying, it's actually that the existing limit that's been set on those feeder circuits is constraining distributed energy development. And it's not just a little marginal amount. I mean, the numbers that come up are between 8 and 12 megawatts on a 12 to 13 kV circuit normally. So that's what, and I was thinking that since Samantha comes from the community solar community, she could speak to that, the impact of that limitation. I think Eric said that, yes, this is a specific example of a problem that needs a solution. So I thought that we could discuss it in that context.
Okay, I have some thoughts on both of these issues, but I see Eric has his hand up. Hey, Eric.
Hi, Samantha. Thank you for joining. I'll say, missed you. Don't want Eli to feel like he's the only one we missed. In regards to, I just want to touch on one. In regards to the 13 megawatt limits that were placed first on our system, I think over the years the utilities adopted the crawl, walk, run methodology in regards to how we integrate DER into our systems. So as a way to enable DERs to get onto the system and give us an opportunity to learn and integrate, there was a 3 megawatt limit that was put on the lack of a better term, or 15 kV class feeders. And I think we are evolving past that, and a lot of this has been addressed in the interconnection working group, and the fact that we've moved up the community solar sizes. I think they were 2 or 3 megawatts before, and now they are 5 megawatts. Those are some of the things that were taken into consideration, and to add to that, the way we were doing hosting capacity analysis before took that into consideration. And moving forward, there are opportunities, since we should be jogging now, where we would be utilizing analysis on a per feeder basis to help determine actually what is the hosting capacity, allowable hosting capacity on each feeder is something that the utilities are looking into. At least I know for the BGE, and the PHI team is looking into those. And a lot of that needle has actually been moved in the interconnection working group. So, you know, just to provide a little bit of background of the conversation there, Sam, that we
Yep.
were having earlier. Secondly, Mr. Cook was sharing with us that there are instances where we need more information in the hosting capacity maps to help developers make more prudent decisions on when and where they can interconnect, or actually you know, just make decisions where they should be making requests in the interconnection queue, right? And I had asked for where are we actually seeing some issues where the hosting capacity map wouldn't be helping, wouldn't be providing the information that the developers need right now, and taking into consideration the changes that are being proposed from the interconnection working group. I think in RM81 also wouldn't be addressing some of the concerns that the developers had, where we need to be providing more data within the hosting capacity maps to help the developers be more effective and efficient with their time. And I'll pause there. Hope that, team, if I summarized it and I missed out any keys, please help me out.
Well,
You got all that, Sam?
yeah, yeah. I think most of it. Well, you know, thanks for summarizing, and I'm sorry I missed the initial discussion. So I think, Eric, I agree with everything you just said about the fact that a lot of this overlaps with discussions that have already happened or will happen within the interconnection working group. So I won't kind of bore everyone here, but I'll just say, you know, to Al's point, the circuit capacity limits issue is huge, frankly, for the community solar industry. I hear about it almost every single day from members of CCFA, and you know, and by that I mean, when it comes to interconnection, which is, by the way, like a totally separate process from the hosting capacity analysis and maps. When it comes to interconnection, the circuit capacity limits that are, you know, sort of codified in the technical interconnection requirements documents that some of the utilities have are the biggest barrier to solar development, to community solar development in Maryland. So that's why I hear about it all the time. And that's why you've probably all heard me talk about it a lot in the interconnection working group, which I'm also a part of. And I do know, like, you know, that's been discussed a lot. I think it's, you know, my sense is that the intention of the regulations that sort of perpetuated those limits was not to rely on a broad rule of thumb based approach to determining whether a project could interconnect, but rather, you know, those determination should be made based on a site-specific analysis. You've all, not all of you, most of you have heard me say all this before. But point being, I do just want to acknowledge that, yeah, that's a huge problem. For our purposes here today, I don't know that I need to say more than that, because I think this is a pretty interconnection-specific challenge. If there's a question here about how do we improve hosting capacity maps for developers, I have a whole little presentation I can say about that. I mean, it's literally, I think, maybe 4 slides. So I'm happy to talk about that in more detail if that's something that, we feel is in scope for this group and would be appropriate, whether it's here or in the interconnection working group. But yeah, I think those are my initial thoughts on that whole discussion.
And if I may, Judge, I just want to make sure I acknowledge and agree with Samantha on the fact that, for us to achieve the Maryland goals from solar penetration perspective, and for us to be able to make the move, because we made a decision as a state to move to 5 megawatts on community solar when the utilities had the 3 megawatt limit in place. The community solar sizes, I think were they 2 megawatts? Somebody help me out, and maybe Sam can help me out on that, but they were much younger.
They were 2
They were 2.
They were
Thank
Under
you.
2.
Right.
in the pilot.
So it worked well then, right? We as a state have evolved, right? And the utilities, at least BG, PHI, we're looking how to evolve with that. I think we are. We acknowledge, right? Because we agreed to the changes up to 5 megawatts, and we're putting things in place, right? And I hope when we get a chance to actually get those changes in place, that it will make our developers happy. But it's not something we can just snap the finger and it happens, right? And I hope the rest of the stakeholders and the developers can appreciate that we're working on it. We know we need to do something about it, and it's coming soon.
Go ahead, Al.
Yeah,
And then
just a parenthetical comment, but I think we're all in the same place, that this is something, I think that because of largely the discussions in the interconnection working group and so on, and the industry's realization of their constraints, that the utilities are committed to working on. So that's really where we want to be. I would just say that even under the 2 megawatt, I spent 7 years on the net metering working group until we got the permanent program bill through. And so it was a problem even then, because you couldn't have 2 megawatt projects along the same feeder. And so, and even now, probably part of the point of reserve capacity is to leave capacity for some rooftop solar and so on. So if you raised it to 5, then that's going to be self-contradictory, because you can't. So the idea is to do what Samantha was talking about, which is a circuit-specific determination based on what's already there. What are the characteristics of the load characteristics and other characteristics of the circuit and so on, so that, we can have places where we might even have 2 5 megawatt projects, because the siting issues are the other constraint. And so if we have a place where a second one could be added, but the reserve capacity determination is preventing that, that's what we need to look at on a circuit specific basis. That's all. So it has been a problem. It's going to be it is now a bigger problem, and it will continue to be a major problem, as Sam has said, until we actually deal with it. So I appreciate the fact the utilities are moving on this, and hope that happens relatively quickly.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Eric.
I don't want to jump in front, Tim, but my apologies there. But right, so just to share with the team, we spoke earlier about bidirectional capability on the system, right? There's some things that needs to be put in place. We were talking about protection and things earlier, 3VO and things of that nature, right? As our First Energy folks shared, there are things that we do on a per feeder basis as we are adding DER to the system in being able to upgrade protections for on our circuits to enable DER, and there are things we have to look at, the protection issues, the voltage issues, because no one our customers that are on our distribution system don't want to have voltage violations because we've put solar farms on the system. So those studies needs to happen, right? So there are different things and studies that we need to perform to be able to get there. And if we proposed a full-blown, let's go get all of our protection relays upgraded from electromechanical relays to the newer microprocessor-based relays, to be able to really be able to integrate more DER, our OPC team is gonna say, hey, we need to strike that from our MYPs and things of that nature. So we have to be very methodical and strategic about this. We've learned a lot with the 2 megawatts. We're moving away from that. And there are physics that is bounded on how we operate the system, right? There are things that are on the system that other folks may not see, right? Some of these limitations you get on the hosting capacity maybe because we the size of cables we have in place, maybe the impact upstream. I get it that we may want to know those information at the developer's level, but my question is, sharing that level of information, right, wouldn't change the physics that's bounding us on why the hosting capacity is what it is, right? But I see, just wanted to share my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, and thank you, Eric. That's what you described. I think partly falls into the category that Tim was talking about of additional information, but it also comes into the process by which the capacity is determined on a circuit specific basis, which is what Sam was talking about. In New York, what they've done is set up a series of standard, what they call screens, but basic criteria, so that each circuit is analyzed in relation to the things you were talking about. If the protective devices on that existing circuit are the limiting factor, then that can be specified, and then that falls into the additional information about the circuit or the cable size or whatever. So you're right. I mean, each circuit, as you say about utilities, each utility is different. Each circuit is different in respect to hosting capacity, but by determining it with a standardized methodology, then we all are able to use that information to plan, which is where this discussion was hopefully taking us.
Thank you, sir. Tim.
And I think I'll perfectly segue off of that. Just and thanks, Al and Sam, for kind of tackling that issue, because I actually probably agree that what you're raising around like the capacity limitations is probably the larger issue here, compared to like whether or not the hosting capacity maps have enough information on them, because those are the actual limits that are in fact keeping things from interconnecting. So I appreciate that you guys are bringing it up. I think to the interest of this working group, I'm curious what others think about what exactly this working group, how the working group can incorporate it, because I know a lot of those the conversations about TIR is going to happen in the interconnecting working group. And my thought is, I mean, does what we have in our like recommendations, you know, if we're making DSB regulation, does it need to reference that hosting capacity analysis should reflect the TIRs, and then expect that the interconnection group, you know, advances those TIRs to see the level of, you know, like availability that we want in terms of, or the limitations, the reduction limitations that we want to see. So I guess that's my question of in terms of moving this conversation forward for this working group, is where does this intersect and what exactly is our output here? Yeah.
You want to weigh in, Jacob? I mean, anybody from the interconnection work group that might be able to shed some light on it?
Yeah, I'll say just initial thoughts is just off the top of my head. This is my first phase in the interconnection working group, so I'm, you know, still getting used to understanding kind of where those lines are. I mean, to me, this sounds, especially talking about updates to TIRs and technical requirements for interconnection, a lot of that sounds like that should fit within that working group. So I think I may be, you know, unclear of where at least some of that fits in here, especially as we're talking about planning, but certainly open to hear thoughts.
Okay. Sam?
I'm scratching my head and trying to remember back now to the initial RM81 rulemaking session. And I guess the second one as well. But well, you'll know the answer to this, Judge McLean. I mean, my sense is that this group has been tasked with taking a look at hosting capacity analysis, not necessarily the maps, but the analysis, so that the methodology is there. And I think, you know, I guess to Tim's point, there is a question about how and whether the hosting capacity analysis should reflect the circuit capacity limits or not. I mean, I think I would argue not, because I would argue that the circuit capacity limits don't really comply with existing regulations or meet the intent of things. But, you know, that's obviously another discussion that we'll have somewhere else. But I think that's really the only the overlap is sort of what's the hosting capacity methodology that's standardized across utilities. As it relates to, or for use in, you know, distribution system planning and forecasting.
Sam, may I ask, when you say circuit capacity limits, what do
Yeah.
you mean?
Good question. Sorry, I mean so to give an example, it's the 3 megawatt limit on a 12 kV feeder.
Okay, so we've dealt with that.
We've dealt with this. Yeah, feeder limits, the the stuff in the TIR, the thing that says you can't have more than an aggregate of whatever. Yeah.
We've dealt with that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just to a planning ear, when you say capacity limits, that's like rating limits. Right?
Yeah. Exactly. No. Yeah. Yep. I know. Sorry.
Right.
Terminology. It's
Okay.
that's what it's called in the, you know, I'm picturing the TIR document in my head, and there's a table with the label, you know, DER aggregate circuit capacity limits or something.
I
That
got
helps.
you. I got
It might
you.
make it worse.
Thanks.
I don't know.
Thanks.
Dr. Bartlett?
Yeah, thanks. It sounds like we're converging. So it seems that the output for this working group would be that for planning purposes, the hosting capacity, as reflected on hosting capacity maps, would reflect the actual circuit specific, standardized, determined capacity of that circuit, along with the annotations of what part of that capacity is already used, and potentially what part might be held in reserve, but that the determination would be based on a circuit specific approach. But then that becomes information for planning, so it does fit into the context of this working group. And I think that's what the utilities have said. They're working on moving towards that circuit specific determination maybe the standardization issue we can learn from New York or other places. But then once that is established, that would be reflected in the hosting capacity information. It's in the capacity maps and the associated data and information that are included with those maps.
That actually kind of made sense to me. I don't know. Does that make sense to everyone else? Tim agreed. Jacob, you?
I think if just again processing all of it, I think
It's all right.
you know,
Yeah, and I think, I'm not sure, Sam, was part of your question whether or not whatever our output is going to be should be constrained or limited to what the existing capacity limits are now, like the 3 megawatt capacity? Was that kind of your question?
Kind of. I think I was maybe getting a little into the weeds, but I'm thinking through the fact that, we within this group will presumably discuss at some level, or at least review sort of a hosting capacity analysis, like methodology itself. And I think there, to Tim's point, there is a question there about whether, maybe not whether, but sort of how hosting capacity calculations overlap with, things like the utilities existing, what I'm referring to as circuit capacity limits. So in other words, the utilities say you can't have more than 3 megawatts, on a 12 kV line.
So we left her, or she left us. I mean, that kind of makes sense. I mean, maybe hopefully she'll come back on, but I think how hosting capacity is determined and determining reserve hosting capacity is turning to okay. Shannon left. I think that's within our bailiwick. So, Samantha, you're back.
Oh goodness, sorry about that.
It's okay. You were rolling and then you just fell off.
Yeah, then I fell off. I was saying, just to give an example of what I meant, that if you're calculating hosting capacity analysis, it's not clear to me how the traditional methodology there would account for a utility's existing rules about how much aggregate capacity you can have on an existing line. So I think that's sort of like, again, it's just a methodology question. It's a bit in the weeds. I don't know that it will be necessary for us to cover, if, for example, utilities determine that they are going to not use the aggregate circuit capacity limits they currently use anymore. And by that, I mean the 3 megawatt limit on a 12 kV line.
Right. Okay. Mark, you want to weigh in?
Oh, I'd love to. I just want to note that in the interconnection work group, row number 31 of anybody who's in that group of John Burkowski's issue list, I believe is this issue, Sam, the aggregate limit of large distributed energy resources. And I guess without getting into the merits of it, I do think that makes more sense to discuss in that interconnection work group. And that's not me trying to get out of it, because I'll be on that group as well.
Appreciate that, and I think I agree with that statement that it's perhaps a better fit there.
Question I have, right? Did we have an agreement in which working group we're gonna be addressing what, especially when it comes to the hosting capacity analysis?
We have a list.
Got funded to us.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. To piggyback on you, Judge McLean. Yeah, we have a list of 4 bullets, Eric, that this work group has been tasked with reviewing in light of the RM81 rulemaking. I can try to drop them in the chat, but John, it's the list that John Borkowski presented on during the last session.
Yes,
Yeah.
My apologies, Judge. So I'm aware of those 4, right? So did we make an agreement in the interconnection working group that that those discussion points will not be in the interconnection working group, but here in the DSP.
I don't know I can't comment for the interconnection folks, but my guess is to the extent that they're punting issues to us, their reference to or reliance on those issues will be cursory, if any.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can give my 2
That's
cents.
just a guess.
If helpful, I can give my 2 cents based on the read,
Please.
and I put the 4 bullets in the chat. These are John had them in slides. I did some slight tweaking to the phrasing. But my perspective, based on what this work group has been tasked with, I think hosting capacity methodology appears to be one. How DER forecasts are used in, and if they're used in determining reserved hosting capacity. I don't know that that one is actually the case, and therefore that might not actually need to really occur. The right sizing methodology, and so just for those who are less aware of that, MCAM allows for utilities to propose upgrades that are larger than, you know, the size of the interconnecting DER and are designed to interconnect future DERs. So if utilities want to right size an upgrade, meaning, you know, really make it 2x, 3x, 4, 4x bigger, that's obviously, examples. Then this group is tasked with developing what the approach is to determining where right sizing should occur. And then the fourth one is back to what we were talking about right before, I think it was right before the lunch break or just after, a methodology to determine if and how DER forecasts are used to determine areas of the system for hosting capacity upgrade plans. Now, it did sound like if the intent so hosting capacity upgrade plans were adopted, right? That was an approved regulation in RM81. My read, based on the presentation earlier, and I guess utility folks can clarify, I think the solar ready areas is one path forward to implementing a hosting capacity upgrade plan. It sounds like under that approach, it will not necessarily use DER forecasts to determine where on the system there should be hosting capacity upgrades, but it would utilize the RFI process to determine that. So if there is going to be, so effectively, if the solar ready areas is the only version of a hosting capacity upgrade plan that is being developed, then I think it's already effectively determined how the priority locations will be determined. It's through the RFI process, and that seems reasonable, I'll add. And therefore, if there's not an additional hosting capacity upgrade plan approach being proposed by the utilities, then I don't know that this last bullet actually kind of truly needs to happen. Oh, and also I'm realizing that last bullet was cut off. So I'm going to add the last text of that last bullet in the chat. All right, that's the full one. So yeah, I'll pause there. So just to recap, it sounds to me like this work group primarily needs to focus on hosting capacity methodology, and determining areas for right sizing. Those seem like the two areas that don't have clear resolution right now, that this work group has been tasked with. That's my read of it, but I'll let others add in, especially if they disagree.
All right. Anyone disagree with that read?
Hey, Judge Mark Zuka again. I don't necessarily disagree, but since there isn't an order from RM81, I do want to go back and listen to basically what was a verbal order from the chair. Sure. to understand exactly. I mean, I definitely agree with the DER forecast as associated with right sizing. And then, Eli, you're correct. The hosting capacity upgrade plans in the new regulations list A, B, C, D, E, a bunch of different things that have to be included. And some of those things are your methodology you use to do your forecasts, those kind of things. So those would inherently be in there. As far as the hosting capacity, that's where I'm just a little bit more unsure. I want to go back and listen to that before necessarily agreeing that this group is in charge of coming up with a guidelines on hosting capacity framework. I guess I intended that. I thought that was more in DER interconnection group, but I'll go back and listen.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark. And that's fair. All
Yeah,
right.
and I'll just sorry, Judge. I'll just quickly add. It doesn't. I don't think it particularly matters exactly which group tackles that, as long as one of the work groups is tackling that. That's the case. So, Judge, I'll
I would
let
agree
you
with
and John
that.
fight
Yeah.
that out.
No, I would agree 100% with that, and I can run that by John to see, but I can tell you, I was like, oh, I thought you were doing that. So don't be shocked if that's going to end up on our plate. DeAndre.
Yes, I am here to confirm that we are the work group that it has been tasked with determining the methodology for hosting capacity. And that was definitely expressed in ARM 81 and has been expressed by John in the interconnection work group. This work group this work group is being looked upon to kind of tie everything together from the other work groups. In regards to hosting capacity and locational value, things of that sort, we're looked upon to determine the grid needs, which I think will influence a lot of the other things as well, such as hosting capacity and the value of DERs as the needs in order to improve or maintain or the grid or modernize the grid are what is going to drive a lot of what will be or what is needed, I guess. But determining the need will also, in addition, assist the energy storage program with determining what mechanisms they want to propose that will help drive the integration of energy storage. So there are a lot of things that we've been tasked with doing here in this work group that will definitely help the other work groups or provide them with some level of direction, just as much as we feel like we need some direction from them. So we should definitely look to collaborate with some of these other groups and get some feedback to kind of help shape what it is that we want to produce here.
All right. All right. So it sounds like it's us. So we're batting cleanup for everybody, I guess. We'll probably get blamed for whatever we miss. Yes, Al.
Yeah, when we start to talk about all the different pieces together, I think maybe we lose the sharpness of the one task that we were talking about, which is, how do we establish this methodology for hosting capacity determination? And what I would suggest, I mean, Eric listed a whole set of factors that play into that determination, and I pointed to New York. I'm not sure whether the Illinois example has specific, I call them criteria, but they call screens. That is, what are the things that you look at to determine hosting capacity, and they have to be responsive to all of those considerations that we've been talking about, which is, the protection on the circuit, or security devices that we can't talk about, but that are there, whatever. As well as the load characteristics and the existing DERs on the circuit and so on and so forth. But I think that if we can look at some of these examples and identify a set of aspects of the circuit that need to be considered in determining the actual capacity of a 12, 13, whatever kV feeder, if we can just identify those things specifically, what are the screens, then we have a methodology essentially, and that those can be applied. There's going to have to be some uniformity in the way that the utilities determine this, and so that would be my suggestion, is that we look at some of these other examples and just identify the things that need to be included in the analysis of hosting capacity, and propose those to the commission as part of our overall recommendation.
And Dr. Bartlett, before you go, did you drop, and if you did, in your comments, did you have a citation to the New York example you were looking at?
No, I did. What I put in there was the I think it was 9201 order from the commission on the UCBA.
Okay.
No,
All
we
right.
can dig around and find out what the New York criteria are.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right, Jacob, did you just have your camera on so I don't feel like I'm alone, or?
Yeah, just keeping you company.
No, well, believe me, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. All right. All right. So obviously there's going to be more to come on hosting capacity. Let's see. All right. The next item I had, but I don't really remember seeing many, if any, comments, was on the resiliency and reliability. It was kind of in response to Dr. Bartlett's comments from our previous meeting. I think he was looking for some more definitions or some components that would fit in under there. But if, like I said, I didn't get any. I don't recall getting any specific comments on those. All right. Well. All right. One last thing we got to talk about. All right. The last thing I wanted to talk about, and Mr. Cathan, I haven't forgot about you, was PJM and utility coordination. And this was more or less in response to some of the commissioners' comments from the technical conference. So, Jacob, do you know the extent to what utilities currently coordinate with PJM and the extent to which you anticipate that increasing in the future?
Yeah, I certainly, there's existing coordination between the distribution system and obviously transmission planning, and certainly plenty of conversations that are ongoing between, the organizations there to provide, some coordination there. And recognizing, FERC 2222 will have, some degrees of impact on that coordination, especially, more in the operations space, to a degree than planning, as you look to, day ahead markets, day of markets, and some of those operational coordinations that'll happen between the aggregators, between PJM, and between electric distribution utilities. So fully anticipate, in spaces like that there's going to be continued and growing coordination. Obviously, interconnection working groups taking on aspects of FERC 2222 implementation, or at least that's one of the many issues identified for phase 6. So I believe some of that will be certainly tackled there in terms of implementation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jacob. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Yes, Mr. Cathan.
Yeah, thank you, Jacob, for that. And you're right. The interconnection work group has it on their agenda. I have some specific comments, and I've filed them in RM81, and also was at the most recent interconnection work group. That I'm not sure. While I'm happy to have integration working group look at all the issues associated with FERC 2222. There are a number of issues which are not interconnection based. In particular, things like registration, even coordination, and I'm not sure that's necessarily fits under the interconnection area of scope. But what I wanted to bring up specifically here is, in the comment that Sierra Club made, was that that in the focus of this group, the distribution system planning, that as aggregation does happen, and as aggregators seek to work with DERs in an aggregated fashion, is that being reflected in how the distributed system is being upgraded or operated, such that the planning for the distributed system needs to be adjusted. So I would recommend that there be examination of that as we dig into it. I think that as FERC 2222 and PJM will be implemented in February of 26, and Maryland needs to think about how this will start be impacting how the system is operated and planned.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cathan. Jacob, you got anything on that?
I think the utilities are obviously, working towards, meeting the requirements for 2222 implementation for that 2026 timeline. And obviously, I agree that there are impacts to operations and what's required there to support aggregators within the system. And obviously that, potentially those operational capabilities can certainly be under consideration when planning the system, right? And some of those connections there. And so it's definitely something the utilities are already beginning to look at to understand what exactly are those impacts, what adjustments do need to be made, to support that implementation in 2 years.
Okay, thank you. But I'm a lead issue. I'll continue to kind of push on as we go forward.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? All right. Mr. Cathan, did you have anything else you wanted to hit?
No, thank you, Judge, for asking that question. No, I was just looking at the only other thing was, and I think we just spent a lot of time on it, was about right sizing and DER forecasts. So I don't think that was the one that was outstanding, and I don't think we need to discuss it for any further.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to be coming back to that next week. So we've got a few things that we'll need to follow up on from my list, and the list is going to grow because I've got a couple things that we talked about today. So I know we didn't finish talking about hosting capacity. We still have more to do, but at the same time, and I realize we're going to be talking about this with our next meeting, but I would like folks to start thinking about our next blocks, which are identifying possible solutions to grid needs, and the next one would be screen/evaluate possible solutions. So for the next meeting, I'd like to hit those two boxes in addition to all the follow-up items from this one. Again, if we have to go a little bit longer, fine, but I would like to at least start the discussion on those next two boxes. Eli gave me a thumbs up, so at least I'm not too far out in left field, or maybe just Eli's out there with me. So anybody have, see, OPC likes all my jokes. I just think you guys are trying to butter me up, so I agree with you.
Yeah,
all right, unless any.
No, just to add, I was just going to note, looking at the Jade roadmap, I think these are probably, I mean, I would be curious of your perspective, Judge, but these are probably this is probably like the last set of like really key Jade blocks that I think require discussion. The choosing solutions and publishing of a plan probably fits pretty cleanly under the box before it, right? Like screening the solutions and so anyway, I think this work group, at least from my perspective, is probably not going to need to particularly focus on specific project design. Assessing results is one of the last boxes, which is interesting and probably something at least worth a short discussion. But yeah, I just wanted to note that I think some of the last Jade boxes are kind of effectively like subsumed in these next two. So I think that's a good approach.
I would agree with you. I don't know that we have to discuss choosing the particular solutions, and the utilities have already agreed to publish their plans. So I think actually we've already kind of addressed that one. And the assessing the results, I think I'm in agreement with you. That shouldn't be too difficult. So I know we still have to hit transparency. And Eli, did you want to talk about your metric subgroup to the extent you have any updates on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to give an update,
Awesome.
Judge. Thanks. And thanks to everyone who participated in that. Yeah, we had a productive discussion on Monday. We walked through the straw proposal. The straw proposal effectively just breaks out 3 overarching categories of metrics that we're recommending be tracked within, whatever this DSP plan process looks like. It's effectively just a list of metrics that should be reported on. At this stage, there was helpful back and forth between folks in the subgroup discussing where folks felt like these metrics should live, where these should be reported on, whether reporting should take place all within here or within, or if it should stay within disparate report. Effectively, right now, there are a lot of disparate reports that contain a lot of these metrics. And so there was discussion around whether they should remain just in those disparate reports or whether there should be any consolidation, and that should kind of all fit within a DSP plan. So it was a productive discussion. The next step is the Strategy team, on behalf of OPC, is taking kind of another crack at the proposal, given the feedback we heard from the subgroup folks on Monday. We'll turn that back around to the subgroup, get additional feedback, likely have another meeting, and then I think the hope would be to bring it to this to the broader work group. So we're currently working on developing a second iteration of it, and we'll continue to keep the broad work group posted on our progress.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right. Anybody else before we wrap up? All right. As always, appreciate everybody's attendance and patience and participation. We'll plan on meeting. Yes, sir. Dr. Bartlett.
Sorry, I was actually digging. You had asked a question. I had raised this question about the resiliency bow tie thing, and so I just went out and dug up the slide, and I put the URL. I think I was going to test it to the slide in the chat. It shows it's basically a fairly high level framework of the.
It looks like it's a YouTube clip.
Yeah, it's a YouTube.
Okay.
It's the slide from the YouTube thing. So on the one side, it has threat analysis, identifying the physical and cyber vulnerabilities, and identifying solutions to prevent specific failures. And then on the other side, it has what happens if the failure occurs, and what are the solutions to mitigate that failure, and what are the potential impacts, and so on. So it is a framework, but it's a useful way of thinking about the resilience issue. It came from the presentation itself.
Right. Yeah. It was your bow tie example. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Does that URL work for you? It should pull up a slide.
It pulls up. It looks like it pulls up the entire technical conference.
Oh, okay. Then it is at time 1 hour 53 minutes and 12 seconds.
All right. 1:53, 12. Okay. All right. I'll throw that in our follow-up list again, and hopefully we can get some discussion going on that, sir.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks.
All right. So in terms of comments, we'll meet on the 8th. If folks could get comments in by the 1st, that'd be great on everything we're going to talk about, and then reply comments on the 6th. All right. Anything else? Yes, sir. Dr. Bartlett, anything?
Oh, nope. Sorry. That's left over.
No, it's fine. No, appreciate the company. All right. So we'll see everybody in a couple of weeks. Thanks again.
Thanks, Judge.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.